r/AskReddit. Taxi drivers of Reddit, have anyone actually jumped into your taxi and screamed "follow that car"? If yes, what happened? Oh god, I have a really bad story for this. I used to drive a taxi for my uncle's company. A guy gets in my taxi, says just follow that car and reassures me it's nothing serious. Except when the other car stops, he gets out and runs to the car we were following and drags the guy out and starts hitting him in the face, hard. I got out and was yelling at him and calling him an asshole for lying to me, and he got all in my face and threatened to beat the shit out of me too, said a bunch of racist slurs at me, then ran off. The guy who got punched had his nose broken. The weirdest part is that he had no idea who that guy was. Not entirely related, but I once had somebody jump into my car and I wasn't even a taxi. I was driving down the street in Boston and was stopped at a red light, minding my own business. Suddenly, my passenger door flung open and someone climbed in. Completely shocked, I didn't even have time to react. For some reason it never entered my mind that I should be alarmed or concerned about this trespasser, so when I saw that it was an elderly lady I just remained calm. Without skipping a beat, she said in a thick Russian accent, "You take me home, please." So, I started driving. I asked where she lived but she just said keep going, I tell you when to stop. At that point it dawned on me that she probably had dementia and that she likely thought I was someone she knew, or maybe even a taxi. Nope. After a few minutes of conversation it was abundantly clear that this woman had simply picked the first car she saw, gotten in, and requested a ride. During the 10-minute car ride she asked about my life. I was in college studying psychology at the time, and when I told her this she said "You make good psychologist, very nice boy." It put a big smile on my face. My grandparents had all died either before I was born or during early childhood, so I don't think I had ever had an elderly person say something like that to me. It felt nice. Finally we reached an apartment building and she told me to pull over. When I put the car in park she turned to me and said "Thank you driving me today." I assured her it was no problem at all and wished her the best, and her parting words to me as she climbed out were "Very good boy, good luck with studies." After pausing for a moment, I drove away and just kind of let it be. It was such a nonchalant and comfortable interaction that I resisted my temptation to immediately text friends to tell them what had happened. It felt like that would have cheapened it, or turned it into a novelty. It was just so natural and I went with it. She's unlikely to be alive at this point, but I hope she enjoyed the rest of her days. Godspeed, Russian grandma I had for a day. I'm actually a taxi driver, bike taxi/pedicab. I was hanging out a corner when a coworker of mine got a ride across the intersection. Suddenly a guy walks up to me and tells me to follow that cab, but keep a distance. This guy looked current or ex-military, demeanor, haircut, attitude. Has one of those earbuds like the agents from The Matrix. Exuded the vibe of being very professional/competent and not giving a fuck at the same time. So I was born for this moment. I read all the Tom Clancy books as a kid, all the books about spycraft during World War II and the Cold War, every spy movie ever made, etc. I kept about 100 yards distance and then would accelerate when they went around a curve anytime they were near a light or intersection. I have all the lights memorized, to ensure we would make the same light but a little later than they did. At one point a car pulls up alongside and another guy switches places with the original guy and we keep going. After about 12 blocks the pedicab pulls over ahead of us and the guy tells me to pull over. Hands me $20 for a $12 ride, although I would have done it for free just to live my 9-year-old fantasy. Probably just local cops, but I can dream. Been driving a cab for about a year now, usually working the 6p3a shift. My dispatcher radios me to a house 5 minutes till the end of my shift. Short 2-minute drive later, small city, I pull up in the circle driveway as a car pulls out the other end and speeds off. The largest man I have ever seen in my life comes barreling out of the house like a fucking bull and jumps in my cab. "Did you see the car that left? Follow it." I caught up to the car and followed it out to the highway. As soon as it got on the highway the car put on its hazard lights and floors it. The mountain of a man in the back seat. My wife is in labor and my father-in-law is driving, tells me to catch up and he'd give it $200. So naturally I floor it going about 90 miles per hour in a 45 zone. His father-in-law happened to be the city police chief and had called in an escort. Looked in my rear-view mirror and see 4 cop cars about a mile off and catching up quick. I panicked and almost started to slow down when he told me they were an escort. Sure enough 2 of the cops go speeding past me like I was in park. Keep in mind I'm still going 90 miles per hour. The other 2 pull behind me as we still had 2 to 3 miles to go. Another minute or 2 passes and we come squealing up to the ER, 2 nurses already waiting outside. He thanks me, hands me the money and jumps out of the car. TL, doctor got a police escort with a pregnant woman's husband and made $200. This sort of happened to me about 20 years ago. Not a taxi driver, although I was driving down a main road and saw a dude running around with a baseball bat and then cop cars parked on a side street. Young me decided that I want to get involved, so I pulled down the side street and found a cop on foot a good distance away from his car. I told him about baseball bat guy and he gets on his radio. Guess he got an immediate update on his radio, looks at how far he is from his car and he says, "Can you drive me down the road?" I'm thinking fuck yeah, and tell him to jump in. He does, and I am seriously driving around back roads with a cop riding shotgun giving me directions while on his radio. Only lasted for about 2 minutes and then he jumps out to pursue the guy on foot. Not a very satisfying ending to the story, since I never found out what happened. But damn it, that's my story. My story isn't a follow that car, but is similar to yours, so I'll post it under yours. I got hit by a drunk driver who ran a red light. My car was totaled and my passenger was sent to the hospital in an ambulance. Cop at the scene said he would give me a ride to the hospital once they got my car towed and the scene cleaned up, since it was like 3 a.m. and cold outside. We go to leave and I sit in the back of the car, not in handcuffs or anything, just chilling like I was riding in a cab, making small talk with the cop about the accident. As we are driving, he hears something on the radio and immediately tells me hang on. I gotta respond to this. And then hits the lights and sirens and starts speeding big time. We pull into an alleyway and he's unbuckling to jump out before the car even stops moving and he yells back at me, "Stay down. You're not supposed to be in my car. Just stay down and don't get up until I come back." Then he gets out. I peek and he's got his gun out and it's clear he's chasing after someone on foot. He disappears into the darkness and I hear gunshots, sirens, and other cop cars pull up. Nobody notices me because they are so busy with whatever is going on. I was a little worried, like, WTF, did this cop just get killed while I'm hiding in the back seat of his car? But luckily after about 10 minutes he came back to the car, just fine, and we continued our drive to the hospital. He explained that someone was running from the cops and he was the only car near enough to try to cut them off, and he basically chased the guy back toward the original cops. When the suspect realized he was cornered, he pulled out a weapon and exchanged a couple shots with one of the original cops before being tased and caught. It didn't sound like anyone was hurt, which is good. However, the cop giving me a ride was really freaked out. On the way back to the hospital he kept going on about how he shouldn't have been giving me a ride, how he would be in huge trouble if he or I had been hurt in the encounter. I felt bad about accepting what was supposed to be a short ride, and you could tell he was really feeling like I thought giving this kid a ride was the right thing to do, but now I realize why we aren't allowed to do this. Someone could have been hurt or killed. When he let me out of the cop car at the hospital I thanked him and he just said if anyone ever asks how you go to the hospital, you walked, and I agreed. I figure it's been almost 20 years now, so the cop is probably long retired, but still appreciate him giving me a ride. Crazy experience. I'm not a cab driver and I was never told to follow that car. But I was sitting at the Whataburger drive-thru one night and a guy jumped into my car and said, "I'm not gonna rob you or anything, but you need to get the fuck out of here right now. 2 guys just ran me off the road." Okay, so that's not an exact quote as this happened 20 years ago, but that was the gist of it. I thought he was full of shit, so I started to argue with him, when I noticed 2 huge black dudes pulling a tire iron out of the trunk of a car. One of them pointed at my car, and said, "There he is." They started running towards my car, so I took the fuck off. They gave chase, but I had a head start and knew the neighborhood. I was driving way too fast for those streets and hit a speed bump way too hard, but the head start gave me enough time to turn down a side street and kill the lights. I saw them pass the street in rear view mirror and waited a while until I dropped the dude off at one of his friend's house a block or 2 away from where we hid out. I apologized for not believing him and he thanked me for getting him away. Not a taxi driver, but I've asked one to follow someone for me before. I was in Cambodia walking down the street at night, when 2 guys on motorbikes rode up beside me, one on each side. One of them takes his knife out and snaps my purse right off my shoulder, crossbody style purse, and they ride off with it. I'd had quite a few drinks, so I was feeling pretty brave. So I decided to run barefoot as fast as I could, chasing after them. Realizing I wasn't going to catch up with them, I see another bike pass me on the left and stop at a house a few yards ahead of me to drop a passenger off. I quickly ran up to him, hopped on his bike without asking and pointed at the men ahead shouting, "Chase them, they stole my purse," and we took off after them. We rode for maybe a mile before we lost them down an alleyway. I have no idea what my next course of action would have been had we caught up, but well, you know. Alcohol. I had the guy take me back to my friends and gave him some cash for the trouble. Lost my phone, my ID, credit card. Thankfully not my passport. So kind of. I went to pick up at Taco Bell and pulled up in front of the doors and I see the only guy in there staring at me. Now keep in mind I'm in a minivan painted yellow with yellow cab of Orville plastered across the side. After about 5 minutes I get out and walk inside the restaurant and ask if anybody called a cab. The guy that was staring said I did. Are you the taxi? I wanted to say duh, you just seen me get out and ask if anybody wanted one, but I said yes sir. He comes outside and gets in the passenger seat in the front. I got in and asked him where he would like to go and he said can we wait a minute for my friend. I told him yes, but it's 5 minutes for free and 0.50 a minute after that. He said he was fine with it. After about 15 minutes I told him if he doesn't come soon I'd have to leave, but he was adamant that his friend was coming soon. After another 5 he looked behind us and said here he comes. I looked but could not see anything other than an empty parking lot. He gets out, opens the door and ushers in. Nothing. He gets in the front and says Monster says to follow that brown car. The only brown car I could see was parked. I let him know that's not how cabs work and that he would need an address or location. He ended up choosing a spot across town and I took, albeit a little weirded out, but that's the life of a taxi driver. I took him to where he wanted to go and he told me to take a left, to which I complied. Then another left. Then another. Then another. At this point we are coming up to where he originally wanted to go and I tell him, man, you gotta either get out here or tell me where we are supposed to be going. I look over and he is pretending to be asleep, obviously pretending. I told him he can either get out now and pay me or I'd call the cops. He woke up and said okay, I'll just get out here, less coherently, but that's the gist of it. I pulled over and he paid me and got out. I started to drive off when I hear this loud pounding noise and stop this cab right now. I stopped and asked what's wrong? He opens the back door and says you thought you could just kidnap him?
I'd love it if you liked and subscribed.